Okay, so what if I told you that all of human history, I'm talking 6,000 years of it, was all building up to one single day at the Washington Monument? Well, that's exactly what Reverend Sun Myung Moon claimed in a sermon back in 1976. He declared a total cosmic victory for all of humankind. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the key ideas from that really pivotal sermon, the Day of the Victory of Heaven.
And he kicks things off by tying together two events that, seem totally separate: his own release from prison and what he calls the liberation for all mankind. This quote really sets the stage, right? It takes a personal story and just blows it up to this universal cosmic scale. So it begs the question, right? What exactly was humanity supposed to be liberated from?
Well, to really get a handle on the victory, first we've got to understand the problem. The whole sermon is built on this idea that our world is a fallen one, a place that's fundamentally, disconnected from God's original blueprint.
And the picture the sermon paints of God's original world is, wow, it's pretty incredible. It wasn't just peaceful, it was ecstatic. I mean, imagine a world where you could actually understand what the birds were singing about, where if one person laughed, the entire universe would laugh right along with them. It's this vision of just total joyful unity.
And this comparison just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you've got that ideal world, the universe singing together, total joy. But on the other side, you have the fallen world he describes, a place where people might be laughing on the outside, but they're crying on the inside. A world that's become numb, dead. The key takeaway here is this profound separation, not just from God, but from creation itself.
So, okay, how do you fix a world that's broken? Well, according to the sermon, that's what all of human history has been about, this long, really painful process of restoration. The core idea is that humanity has this spiritual debt from the fall, and the only way to get back to that original ideal is to pay it back. That whole concept is called indemnity.
And this timeline kind of shows how the sermon lays out 6,000 years of history as really just a series of repeated failures. It all kicks off with Adam's fall, creating that debt. Then you fast forward to Jesus, whose mission is seen as unfulfilled because of the crucifixion. After that, the spiritual baton gets passed to the Roman Empire, and then later to Great Britain. But each time, the nation supposedly fails to build that God-centered world needed for restoration. So in this telling, every single attempt has just fallen short. Which brings us to America in 1976. It's set up as the final stage, the last chance to finally get it right.
So this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? After all these centuries, all these failures, what was so different about 1976? According to this sermon, what made this moment in America the one that would finally work? Well, the answer all comes down to two really specific events, with the grand finale being the Washington Monument rally. And this thing wasn't just framed as a big get-together. It was seen as the turning point for all of human history. No pressure, right?
Okay, so the climax of the story actually begins at a rally in Yankee Stadium. And right in the middle of it, this massive rainstorm just opens up. But here's the thing. This wasn't seen as just bad luck with the weather. No, the sermon interprets it as a divine test. It's a symbolic crucifixion, meant to be a parallel to the suffering of Jesus. It was supposed to look like a total disaster from the outside. But then, something happened that, in this telling, changed everything. See, when Jesus was crucified, his disciples panicked and scattered. But here, in the pouring rain at Yankee Stadium, the followers stayed. They started singing, an act that's actually described as a protest to God. And that moment of unity, right there in the face of what looked like failure, is presented as the absolute key. It was the complete opposite of what happened 2,000 years ago, and it finally paid off that ancient spiritual debt.
So, after the symbolic crucifixion at Yankee Stadium, you get the symbolic resurrection. The very next rally was held at the Washington Monument, and get this, it drew a crowd of over 300,000 people. In this whole narrative, that huge turnout wasn't just a sign of a successful event. No, it was the ultimate proof, both physically and spiritually, that a victory had been won.
The sermon actually breaks this victory down into 4 distinct parts. First, just the sheer number of people there. That was huge. Second, the message itself was delivered successfully. Third, the whole thing went off without a hitch. It was peaceful, it was orderly. And then there's a fourth victory, a move that actually got some media attention. The members cleaned up the entire area after the rally, which led a TV station to say that Reverend Moon was a man of his word.
And here's another detail the sermon points to that's seen as just incredibly significant. The rally in Washington began at the exact same hour as the state funeral for Mao Zedong over in China.
This was read as this powerful providential sign. You have the champion on the side of Satan, as they put it, being buried, at the very moment the champion on the side of God was being lifted up. All right, so a massive victory has been declared in Washington. What happens next? Well, the sermon immediately pivots to a brand new target, Moscow. The idea is that this victory has completely changed the rules of the game, not just here on Earth, but in the spirit world too.
And this victory leads to a pretty monumental declaration: total liberation. The sermon claims that what happened in Washington literally broke down the walls in the spirit world. You know, the barriers that were separating different religions from each other, and even separating ancestors from their own descendants. So what does that mean? It means spiritual figures like Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad, plus all of our ancestors, are now totally free to work together and help people on Earth directly.
So now, this newly liberated spirit world becomes a key player in what the sermon calls the final battle. And it's all framed using the biblical story of Cain and Abel. On one side, you have the worldwide Abel. That's the younger brother role, represented here by the Unification Church. And their mission? It's to save the other side, the worldwide Cain, which is identified as global communism.
But just to be clear, the weapons for this final war aren't guns or bombs. The sermon lays out 3 spiritual weapons. First and foremost, the theology itself, the principle of God. Second, that newly mobilized spirit world we just talked about. And third, what's called the second generation. This means the youth of the world who, it's claimed, God is now pushing toward this work to challenge the ideologies of their parents' generation.
So when you step back and look at the whole thing, what this sermon really does is completely reframe world history as a kind of spiritual drama. Political events, the weather, social movements, everything is interpreted as a sign in a massive cosmic battle. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? How does a worldview like that change the meaning we find in the political and social events that shape our own lives?